So geeking cool.
Captain's log, stardate 2204.3. While on a routine mission monitoring subspace frequencies, the Enterprise has picked up an ancient Earth transmission from the year 2022. Per Starfleet command, we are to monitor the situation. Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise.
Its 5 year mission to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations.
To boldly go where no one has gone before.
Hey, I'm Frank,
And I'm Derrick.
and today we have a very special guest in studio with us. Uh, I'll let him introduce himself.
Hi, my name's Kevin Knight, longtime friend of Frank's. We've been friends for about 35 years now. Big nerd, geek, ultra Star Trek fan. I've always made the joke Star Trek's my baby because that's always been my number one franchise.
Just to give you a little bit of background, Kevin and I, we actually met in first grade, and we're friends all the way through school. And in high school, we had a particular math class where we would quote Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan word for word, and that was kind of our hobby,
Even to this day, we still do that.
right? Um, Kevin actually met Derrick through the concept of the podcast and through the cosplay. We've taken a few trips to McGuire's together.
Correct. And you say special guest, but I would also say special friend as well. So, Kevin, glad to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you very much for being here. As you might have guessed, today's episode is all about Star Trek. Star Trek is actually probably the very first geekdom that really captured my attention and drew me into it. I started out watching reruns of the original series when I was a kid, and it just immediately captured my attention. And I think Kevin,
Yeah, it was the same with me. I was 6, 7 years old and just flipping through channels one night, and the episode was the Corbinite Maneuver. Was the first Star Trek episode I ever watched.
Wow.
And on screen, you had this for a 6, 7 year old kid, this alien. His name was Baylock, but it captured my attention pretty profoundly. And after that, I just made it a habit every night, 7 o'clock. I was going to watch this little TV show, and then became hooked on it, and then I discovered the toys and everything else that come along with it, and I've been a lifelong fan ever since.
right? Yeah, I would say between the two of us, we have purchased an awful lot of Star Trek merchandise. Derrick actually just watched his very first. You've seen 4 episodes,
Two.
2 episodes.
Two.
Um,
Uh, the first episode, and was Carbonite.
the Corbomite maneuver.
Okay. And the second episode, Let This Be Your Last Battle.
Battlefield. Yeah,
Last Battlefield.
yeah. Those are both really good episodes.
Correct.
And I know that you're just barely getting started in this massive expanded universe that is Star Trek. But what would you say your initial reaction to it is?
Well, my initial reaction was the show was good, but I didn't have, and I think we spoke, maybe I didn't have the backstory because I think I started with season 2, episode 10, maybe, or something like that.
No, you were in season 1 with the
Season
Corbomite
1?
maneuver.
Okay.
But it was not the first episode. You're right.
Correct. So I didn't have a backstory. So again, with anything I watch, I do look to Frank for a lot of questions to gain understanding. I did quickly gain appreciation for the show's diversity, and also the messages within the episodes. So I did gain a quick appreciation for that, and I'm sure that will grow as I continue to explore. But I did value those things. Those are the two things that I valued most. Now, you have to take into understanding that um, the original series was in the 60s or 69.
66 through
Okay.
69.
Okay, so there's a big difference as to the way you watch TV now and the production and things of that nature. So when I got past, I got past some of that. There's a deeper meaning into Star Trek, and I'm glad that you introduced me to it. And so I will continue to watch episodes and gain knowledge and things from it.
Right. And I think that something that you will come to really appreciate, in addition to the diversity, is what's always made Star Trek special to me is the interpersonal relationships between the crew, specifically in the original episodes between Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, Bones.
Okay.
And some of the best arguments in all of Star Trek happen between Bones, who is as human as you can get, and Mr. Spock, right?
Correct.
Uh, although, in the Corbomite maneuver, one of my favorite exchanges is when McCoy tells Kirk that he's going to note something in his medical log, and he says, "I'm not bluffing." And Kirk kind of loses his temper for a second. He says, "Anytime you think you can bluff me, Doctor." But it was that heated exchange that led to Kirk realizing,
That he can bluff the enemy in the episode in order to get the advantage in the tactical situation.
and you even remarked on it, he says, "Which game versus which game?"
He said which game versus which game?
Right.
Oh, chess.
Not
And
chess.
I mean checkers. I mean
No, you're right. Not chess.
not chess, but poker.
Right. And that is such a cool, or at least to me as a kid, man, that was so cool because it was like you were seeing the logical approach was not the best approach in this situation.
And it worked.
Right.
And it worked.
And what did you think of the character who kept kind of losing his cool? He was under the pressure.
Bailey.
When Bailey really kind of, he has a real freak out moment.
Yeah, he was. Well, I say hothead, but and Kurt had to gain control, and so I mentioned to you. Well, I asked a question because in the two episodes that I watched, Kurt actually bluffed a little bit, but you guys informed me that he would actually do it, and just looking out for the members of the crew or whatever if they're in danger. But just for me, myself, and maybe some viewers that have never seen Star Trek, what are all the crew members on the bridge? I know Spock, McCoy.
You had Spock, who was the science officer plus the executive officer of the ship.
Okay.
So he was responsible for basically the entire operations of the ship and make sure that it was, performed in a efficient and a logical manner. And you had, Kirk as the captain, oversaw everything.
Okay.
Then you had Mr. In the original series, he was Lieutenant Sulu, who was the helmsman. He was the one that basically piloted the ship. And in some episodes, he was the one who fired the weapons. Some episodes, it was the navigator, which was Ensign Chekhov.
Okay.
He was responsible for, plotting the courses, giving Sulu the information he needed to steer the ship. Plus, there were some tactical situations where Chekhov, fire weapons, activate tractor beams, items like that. Then you had Commander Scott, or Scotty, who was the engineer. He was responsible for keeping the ship operational, keeping the warp drive online, and if anything was damaged, to get it repaired. And then you had Lieutenant Uhura, who was the intership, communications officer, who, hailed, other starships, other planets, star bases, any kind of intership communications. She took care of that.
So everyone had an important task
Exactly.
that they dealt with. Okay.
And Bones would often come to the bridge, but
Yeah.
his station was actually sick bay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because he was
That's
the chief
and that's where they
medical
took one of the guys to sick bay.
Right.
And,
Okay.
and Dr. McCoy was almost like he was, in those original series, you didn't have what they call a ship's counselor, but he was like a person you could go and talk to if you had problems.
Right.
Because Kirk would confide in him a lot.
Right. And he was quick to prescribe something along the lines of Romulan L or
Sorry and
brandy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have a nice stiff drink. This will help you with your problems.
Yep.
Okay. Now I haven't seen that, but I did find it funny when they brought in Kurt a salad, and he was
Yeah.
like green leaves, and the doc said, "You've gained a few pounds."
Yep.
Yeah. I can relate to
Yeah.
Captain Kirk in that.
Me
You know,
too.
there's a big difference between season 1 Captain Kirk and season 3 Captain Kirk because by then I think William Shatner was eating much better.
Now how many? So William Shatner was throughout the entire
Yeah.
original series.
He's through the original series and through all 6 of the original films and through Generations, which was the first Next Generation film.
Okay. Okay.
And in fact, William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy are the only 2 characters to ever appear on every of the original series episode. Excluding the first pilot. Because DeForest Kelley, he appeared on every episode but one, which was William Shatner's pilot.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a different doctor on that one. And you and I had talked about this. You were talking about the design of the ship, and we just happen to have a nice model of the ship right here.
Absolutely.
And I told you it's really broken down into 3 sections. You've got the warp engines, you've got the engineering section, and then you've got the actual living quarters and the habitable space where the bridge is located. So, Kevin, if you want to explain the breakdown.
This is called a Constitution class starship. You had the 2 warp engines or nacelles, which would generate a subspace field, causing a warp field that propels faster than light speed. The bottom sections of the ship, is called secondary hull, which is where your engineering sections, the cargo bays, all those areas are kept, and then the saucer section, which is where the living quarters, the sick bay, the bridge, and other support systems that's where they were.
And one of the really cool things about the original Enterprise is it actually has a bowling alley on it.
Yes, it has a bowling alley.
Oh, wow. Wow.
You never see it on screen, but it's in the technical manual.
Actually, it was mentioned on screen once.
Okay.
It was
Wow.
it was in the episode the naked time, where Kevin Riley, when he was under the influence, he said there'd be a formal dance at the bowling alley.
That's right. That's
Okay.
right.
The ship also had a chapel, where they, anyone who religious ceremonies.
Right, and they actually conducted a wedding in one episode where Kirk officiates the wedding.
Oh.
They talk about the galley. There's actually some live turkeys that show up in an episode, and the voice of the chef was
Gene Roddenberry himself.
Oh. The writer.
correct. And something else that's interesting is for every iteration of Star Trek, for the most part, now there are some exceptions, but his wife, who plays Nurse Chapel, actually provides the voice of the computer system.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And in fact, she appeared on the original pilot, because Star Trek had a first pilot with Jeffrey Hunter as Captain Pike. NBC rejected that pilot, but they liked it enough to let Roddenberry create a second pilot. So he retooled the show slightly and allowed. That's where he got William Shatner as Kirk instead of Jeffrey Hunter as Pike. Roddenberry's wife, Major Barrett, she was on the first pilot as the ship's first officer. They called her number one.
Okay.
And at the time, NBC didn't like that, so that, he had to recast her as the Nurse Chapel. Well, then she showed up, when the Next Generation premiered. She showed up as a reoccurring character, Loxana Troy. Plus, they used her for the computer voices from I think 1988 all the way to 2009 when she passed away.
Fascinating.
Another key thing that is interesting about Star Trek is there are people who actually played different aliens. Specifically, I'm going to talk about the Klingons, who showed back up many, many years later on Deep Space Nine. So you had the original series, then you had the animated series, then you had the motion picture and the Wrath of Khan, and then you had Star Trek: The Next Generation started in 1986. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it's 87 is when Next Generation come out.
So by the time several years have passed, right, from 1966 to this time. Well, in the 90s, we had kind of a Trek explosion.
Mm-hmm.
You had Deep Space Nine, which was the first time they had ever had a series centered around a stationary space station. And then you had Star Trek Voyager, which premiered later. And Star Trek Voyager was unique because it took place in a totally different quadrant of space. They were cut off from the Federation, and they were in the Delta Quadrant, and it was going to take them a really long time to get back home because of I won't spoil it because you're going to eventually watch it, but something happens. They get propelled across the far reaches of the galaxy, and they have to try to make it back to the Alpha Quadrant, which is where Earth is.
Okay.
So, and then you have Star Trek Enterprise, which is actually a prequel to the original series. It actually shows before the Federation is really a thing, right? It's showing when humans first started going into space, when they first developed warp drive, and it's a really great series. But again, you've got a lot to go through.
I see that now. Man, I don't want to say scratch the surface. I've just only
Yeah,
see the surface, but I haven't touched anything. It just seems like it's just a collection of episodes and seasons and series and different, not spin-offs, but
Yeah,
just
I mean, yeah, Star Trek has had multiple, and even now we're in a second Trek explosion. On Paramount Plus.
okay.
Right now they have four series running, and then they're fixing to start the fifth series.
Okay.
On Paramount Plus right now.
So this is Star Trek 101 for me.
right. Well, and something that you just talked about in your earlier statement, you said the diversity of Star Trek. Diversity has always been one of the core principles that Gene Roddenberry promoted, because one of the things that the Vulcans are known for, it's called
IDIC.
which stands for infinite diversity and infinite combinations. And the original Enterprise, remember, this is 1966. You had an African American female as a bridge officer.
Mm-hmm.
You had a Russian
Mm-hmm.
on the bridge of the ship. You had an Asian on the bridge of the ship. You had a Scotsman. You had McCoy, who went to Ole Miss for medical school, not law school. And you had Captain Kirk, who was also from Earth. But then you also had an alien. And this was part of Gene Roddenberry's vision that eventually in the future we would all work together. We would put aside our petty differences, and we would work together for the betterment of mankind, for the enjoyment and the exploration of space. And we would create a federation that would protect its weakest members from the aggressiveness of the Klingons and the Romulans. And this was such a concept that was so far ahead of its time. And then you fast forward to the next generation, and now the Klingons have even made an alliance with the Federation. You go to Deep Space Nine, the first Star Trek show to have a black captain. You go to Star Trek Voyager, which is the first show centered around a female captain. And all of these things are ahead of the trend. And you see, even in the next generation, you see a female admiral on screen. You see a female first officer who gives Commander Riker a run for his money. Right.
Yep.
And that is part of what makes Star Trek special. Is they were way ahead of that curve when it came to trying to represent. There was actually a Next Generation episode about non-binary people before that was even part of the vernacular.
And it was also, if you go back to 1986, Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home, in the beginning of that movie, you have an African-American female captain.
Correct.
And that had never been seen before.
So
it was Madge Sinclair who played her, and she later reappeared on The Next Generation as Geordie LaForge's mother.
Right.
Oh, okay.
And something else that I thought was really cool about the Next Generation is you actually had a real NASA astronaut play a role on screen. And to us science nerds growing up, dude, there was nothing cooler.
She was one of the transporter technicians that beam people up.
Okay.
And she actually said in interviews her driving force to get into NASA, I believe, was Nichelle Nichols playing Uhura on the original Star Trek.
Okay.
Yeah, and we've talked about that. Nichelle Nichols actually thought about leaving the show, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. actually approached her and said, "Don't you dare. You are so important for all of these young women and young men out there who see you as a role model."
Right, correct.
And she did. She stuck with it and played that character for the majority of her life.
That was big. That was big.
I actually got to meet her in person, and she is probably the nicest, most humble person you'll ever meet. And she told the story about her meeting with Dr. King, and she told about the impact that it had on her life. And she talked about,
and I'm sure on so many more. I'm sure when you said that, the impact that Dr. King had on her life, but the impact that many people to see that on screen.
Gene Roddenberry knew that was important. There was actually the first interracial kiss on American television took place on Star Trek. And there were southern states that refused to air that episode because this is in the middle of the civil rights movement.
Right.
William Shatner intentionally, he did the first take perfectly. The studio wanted to do alternate takes to try to air a version where you didn't actually see the kiss head on to try to get those southern states to air those episodes. Shatner intentionally messed up every other take so that they had
To use.
only one take that they could use, which
Strategic.
he did that because he knew the importance of it, and he did not want
Strategic.
them to be able to edit that out.
Legend.
And there's so many other things that we could talk about when it comes to that, but you are wearing a red shirt, and hopefully you'll survive this episode, and you'll survive the avalanche of content to come. But I will tell you that you're in store for a wonderful trek.
And I mean, you can't cram it all into this episode.
No.
So
Oh yeah, we'll have plenty more episodes, and I've already given you a list of like 5 more episodes that I think you should watch that are some of my favorites. Mirror is right up there at the top of the list. Balance of Terror.
The Doomsday Machine,
Okay.
Muck Time, But the good thing about the original, even the Next Generation, you don't have to really watch them in any kind of specific order.
Okay.
You know, it's episode. There's only one two-parter in the original series.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
There's only two in the Next Generation.
there's
Is
two
there?
parters.
Yeah.
Yeah, you had Best of Both Worlds 1 and 2. You had Redemption 1 and 2. Times Error 1 and 2. Chain of Command 1 and 2.
You're right.
Unification
Dang,
1 and
man.
2. Gambit Part 1 and Part 2.
Well,
I
well,
completely forgot about all those. The only one I remember was Best of Both Worlds and Reunification. I was
Yeah.
specifically thinking about those two.
well, viewers, if you would comment, let us know what episode, what is your favorite episode, and so I'll get a condensed version to try and cram and watch.
Yeah, and hey, who's your favorite captain? Kevin and I used to spend hours putting together a dream team of who we thought, and most of the time I would still end up with the majority of the original crew. But I just that was the
Yeah.
show I started on, so it's the show I love the most. I think I did always put Commander Riker as the first officer.
Me too.
But and don't forget, if you like the content, be sure to hit like and subscribe. Follow us on Instagram. We're going to have our Twitter account back up and running. That has absolutely nothing to do with Elon Musk buying it out. It just has to do with the fact that we finally have a social media person who's going to be helping us out, because Derrick doesn't really do social media, and I'm old, so I barely know how to use it. I'm not quite as old as Star Trek, but sometimes it feels like it. Any final thoughts?
Not any final thoughts, but just let viewers know that we will be at MobaCon.
May 27th through the 29th?
Correct. And Mobile, Alabama.
Yeah, I think all three of us will be there. And we're definitely going to have Kevin back from time to time. Whenever his schedule allows for him to be on screen, he will be. And when it doesn't, he'll be behind the scenes. Did you have any final thoughts?
I just know, Derek. I'm gonna say I'm extremely envious, because I would love to be able to go back and rewatch everything for the first time and get that sense of wonder from it.
Yeah,
So,
and Frank, that's awesome. And Frank shared the same thing. He
thought
said,
I was
"Man,
jealous."
I'm real jealous."
I mean,
of you right
I have seen those episodes, each one probably over 100 times each, and I mean, I still enjoy them, but having that first watch it for the first time, that's something special.
Kevin, you're still watching original series episodes, old friend?
Still, but like true fans, I'm still enjoying the content.
Yeah. You'll actually get this reference
Yep.
later. You'll have to watch Space Seed sooner or later. But real quick, before we sign off, I wanted to say Mother's Day is coming up, and I would never have been able to get into Star Trek or collect any of the stuff that I have from my childhood had it not been for my mother's support of a show that I liked. And I know that Kevin's mother, who is kind of like a second mother to me because I've known them so long and I feel like part of their family, is the exact same. Kevin's mother has always supported his love of the show. And we want to just say thank you very much
Yes.
to all of the parents out there, moms, dads, who have shared this with their children. New dads who are getting into it. And when I say new dad, I mean little Derrick is 6. I always want to say that he's 7 years old. I'm trying to make him older than he really is, but
He will be this year.
That's part of the legacy of Star Trek, I think, is that it's multi-generational. Everyone can enjoy it. It's a family-friendly show for the most part. I've talked about it before, but, my mom took the time to hand sew this costume that I wore. Kevin was actually part of a local starship in Laurel, Mississippi. And they invited me to a costume party that they had, and I can just remember my mom actually sewing that costume.
Mm-hmm.
This was long before Comic Cons were a big thing around here.
Yes. This is the mid '90s, and even back then, there was still a little stigma attached to wearing the uniforms in public.
Right.
Nowadays, it's nothing like that. But back then, it was looked down upon by a lot of people.
Yeah, we were geeks before being geeks were cool, I guess. But that was part of what made our friendship so special too, is because we didn't care. It didn't matter what anybody else thought. We did what we wanted to do, and we had a great time doing it. And that's kind of something I think that we share with Derrick. Derrick's his own person and he does some stuff that makes me shake my head. No, I'm just kidding. I like to give Derrick a hard time from time to time, but we actually work together in real life, and so we see each other a lot. And Kevin, I think I've gone on vacation with him, and we've got some friends in Pensacola that we go and stay with who are big Star Wars fans, who we have recently tried to convert to Star Trek fans. So
Working on it.
right. So I'll quit rambling at this point, and I think we'll close down the episode. Don't forget, in the comment section, list of episodes for Derrick to watch, and they don't have to be original series episodes.
Yeah, just your favorite Star Trek episode.
Right. And Wrath of Khan, Star Trek II, the best Star Trek movie ever made,
Yes.
will be coming back to theaters this year.
For the 40th anniversary.
It's like a
re-release.
retro, like bringing it.
Right. So that was our plan, is we want you to watch Space Seed, and then we're going to go watch that.
Now that's
movie.
cool.
Oh yeah.
And it is so great on the big screen. I've seen it on the big screen before. It is great
See, I'm
in
gonna
theater.
try and go watch the episode.
Yeah, man. And now look, we need to find an IMAX theater. That's what we need to do. But
I'm sure
anyway,
they have one in Louisiana or something.
I'm Frank,
I'm Derrick.
I'm Kevin.
and this has been
So geeking cool.
So geeking cool.